Hello all. I don't know if you can see me or hear me. I'm gonna trust that my support people here are paying attention to things. I'm not real accustomed to Zoom. I've had a couple experiences when I've been invited to a Zoom meeting. For those of you that I've not met before, my name is Vicki Thompson Campbell, and I am in my 18th year with ACT. And I'm joined by my colleague, Beth Alonzo, who may be a familiar name to some of you, and you may have already had contact with Beth. She had joined ACT at the beginning of the year, so I almost got a full year under her belt, and we are splitting the state of Ohio. Now, this portion is what we're just doing because we know last year was a bit of a bear for folks, coupled with COVID and everything that went along with it. We learned the hard way that it also affected people in terms of meeting deadlines and knowing where to find stuff. So we decided we would try to do some mini informal refreshers, at least to get everybody on the right track. And also we know that there are some new folks out there, and I wanted to make sure you're aware of where there's some resources. Now you're gonna have to bear with me because I'm right-handed and the mouse is on the left. So I know what that's gonna mean as I type. But I am gonna start with showing you some resources and how to get to them. Hopefully you don't see the top of my head all day as I'm looking down, but I'm typing in Ohio, well, I thought I was, Ohio Department of Education, ACT. And if anybody's on a computer and you want to follow along with this part just to kind of set some favorites and so on, I encourage you to do that. So as I said, the mouse is a little backward for me, and still didn't come to what I wanted. So we're going to try this. So if you are following along, I am going to this one link, state-funded ACT test, and this was, there were a number of years after we started state testing that I would often say to folks, do you know what I'm talking about when I mention the Ohio ACT website? And they would say, well, I'm not sure. And I would say, are you sitting at your desk? I'll send you a link. Well, of course, well into 5+ years, I discover that there's a link on ODE's website. So if I'm not there to send a link, people know where to find it themselves. So I typed in, I Googled Ohio Department of Ed ACT. And then I'm just scrolling down to where this contact information is for ACT, and it says state ACT website for Ohio. So this may be old hat for some of you, and I apologize. But just try to get everybody up to kind of the same level of knowledge and information. Now, I used to save this as my favorite, but now I've kind of even cut to the chase, and I scroll all the way down to where it says ACT test resources, and I save that one as my favorite just because the other part I really didn't need. If you are new, I will say that first page I came to has a little introductory video there that could be helpful as folks are trying to get a little bit more acclimated. So I'm assuming, I don't know if there's a way to know if people see, okay, because I don't see anything there. But, oh, okay, Beth, keep me honest. So this is the Ohio ACT website. And as I said, this is something that I would strongly encourage you to save as a favorite. Even if you don't have the title of or serving in the role as district or school test coordinator, but if you have an active role in the testing process, working with the students, if you're a school counselor and somebody else is responsible for actually a lot of the behind the scenes for testing, I want you to be aware of this website because of resources that you can make students aware of. So I'm going to point out a few things on this website. As you see my arm crossed again, I'm scrolling down to the blue panel. And had I created this, you would see this in about a 28 font so that it would jump out a little bit more. But under important dates is the schedule of events. So whether or not you want to save that as a separate favorite or not, you know that it's in here as the schedule of events. So there's a few things on here that I'd like to call out. Of course, you see when the dates are, and there's been a kind of a little tweaking, if you will, from year 1 to year 5 to now year 6, going into year 6 of tweaking things. There's a test window 1, there's a test window 2, and there's a test window 3. And at the beginning of each of those test windows, there's actually a date that would be for standard paper testing. Now, ODE would prefer and strongly encourage you, if you are testing on paper, that you select test window 1 or standard paper testing 1 or 2, because if you select 3, you have missed out on opportunities for makeup testing. Now, if that's the only date, if you're testing paper and that's the only date that's going to work out, then you would need to contact ODE, and they would want to have a conversation with you. Now, the exception is that if you're testing online, or if you want to have online capability in your back pocket, because that will provide you multiple options. If for some reason you have stragglers or makeup, and of course, we hope that much of the unknown is behind us. But I guess if there's anything we've learned in the almost going on 2 years, the unknown can change from week to week, month to month. But hopefully, we will have more clear sailing from here on out. So there's your dates. Now, I was told by an educator, because I wouldn't have known this, because I never actually I would never see the administrative manuals unless I look at them here. But these symbols that look like nautical symbols all correspond with the administration manuals. And I call that out, that if you happen to be new in this role, obviously there's certain test materials that accommodated students would use in the manuals accordingly. And in those manuals for accommodations, it's going to spell out the different timing codes and the different accommodation accessibility requirements that fall under each of those timing codes. But more importantly, just know those dates. Hopefully by now, you have done step 1. And step 1 is what formerly known as managed participation. And that always tripped people up, because managed participation, they thought, even when we got into the winter months before testing, well, I did everything. I uploaded my students. I requested accommodations. Managed participation, they've changed it to test date selection. It's 3 different questions primarily that you are providing ACT responses to, and that you would do in the Pearson Access Next platform. Question 1, when are you testing? What's your first test window? Number 2, are you going to test accommodations in that same window? Now remember, the test window will span several days into a couple weeks when it's accommodations and when it's online testing. So even though you might pick test window 1 for paper standard testing and you want to do accommodations in test window 1, you don't necessarily have to start accommodations on the very first day. That's entirely up to you, but it needs to be within that window. Question number 3. So I've said, when is our first test date? What window? When are we going to start accommodations? What window? In what mode? Are we testing paper or online? And even if you're testing on paper, if you haven't done this process already, or if you have, you recall, there's a drop down under online testing and you would simply select non-applicable. And then the last question is when you want your materials sent. So there are multiple choices. Now, if you are selecting March 1 as your first testing date, I wouldn't necessarily encourage you to pick the last materials receipt, and I only say that to be extra cautious. We learned last year that FedEx ought to not have as part of their advertisement reliable, because they weren't necessarily terribly reliable across the board last year. So I have a couple schools in Ohio that I'm guessing the FedEx driver wanted to see Graceland, and the materials were stuck in Memphis for several days, so they didn't get their materials in time. So I'm just saying it's probably best not to cut it too close. So the deadline for that was the 3rd, and now Beth and I, over the last probably week or so, we've been, individually reaching out to folks, letting you know that still needs to be completed. You probably would have gotten an email or 2 or 3 from either one of us already saying that needed to be completed. If you're unsure, we'll give our contact information here in a little bit, and you can let us know, or you can just call us or put it in the chat and we can check. All right, I'm scrolling down. We've talked about the website, saving it as a favorite, talked about the dates, completing that managed participation or test date selection. Now here's a couple resources. I don't want to get lost among all of this. I'm scrolling down to office hours. Now, I'm going to click on one of these just to kind of show you. These are office hours that we dabbled in a little bit last year, but after we completed state testing, the folks that were closely involved decided, you know what, that worked out pretty well. We should probably offer these open office hours throughout the months leading up to state testing. So initially what I did was I registered for all of these office hours so that I would get a reminder, and then I'd save it to my Outlook calendar. You'll notice that several of these that have already taken place say available on demand. Now, the way these open office hours are set up, and it's for all states that are doing state-funded testing, is there is a canned, if you will, mini presentation that will be topical, that will be something that you need to know about, or maybe you could use a little bit more refresher information leading up to that step. And then after that semi-formal presentation, possibly showing you screens and the process, there would be an opportunity in chat window to ask different questions. So if any of these topics, you'll notice at the beginning, there was a recording for new test coordinators. There was one for returning test coordinators. If you have staff that don't have access to the accommodations, don't have access to online reporting, and so on, goes through how to get that access started. There's another one that goes through the process of, as I said, those steps, picking your dates and ordering your materials. Now I'm going to scroll down just a little bit further. The most recent were last week, and that was the next step that's going to be due. That's going to be the student data upload. Now, the deadline for the student data upload is the 14th of January. By all means, you don't have to wait till the 14th of January. And in fact, I would encourage you to get it done before the holidays. And I'm sure that would probably be your desire as well. You may want to access one of these recordings. There were 2 of them. Usually when they have the open office hours, there's a day that's in the morning and there's a day that's in the afternoon. they should have been the same canned presentation, but maybe some of the questions that were fielded might vary. So you can access those. Tomorrow will be one on completing site readiness or a mock administration for online reporting. So if your school or district are planning to test students online, or perhaps you want to go through those steps as a backup. Maybe your primary testing might be on paper, but you'd like to be able to be ready and able to test online in the event that you need some additional dates. You know, I would encourage you to kind of take advantage of, whether it's live or the recording, some of those steps that you need to go through. When it comes to the site readiness and the mock administration for online testing, I strongly encourage you to enlist someone in your district, in your building, that you would consider the IT specialist. Some of these steps are things that they can handle for you, and you don't have to, you know, be like Atlas and have everything on your shoulders. All right, I'm gonna get out of that window, and you can see there's a few more. We take a little bit of break around the holiday time and pick back up with things like if you need to order additional materials. I was surprised, I had a group that I presented to a few days ago, and I said something about, well, I don't know how often you'll have new students move in, and these two neighboring schools told me that it happens all the time, and those two particular schools will find that they might flip-flop where students are enrolled. So it might apparently it happens in some areas more than I think. All right, so you can look at that on your own, know that those office hours are there, and it's not a bad idea just to be aware in case you ever have some quick questions, etc. Gonna scroll down back. I, for some reason, lost my, okay. My next one is office hours for accommodations. Now, this is something that we did last year, and I think it came with much success, and it's on our Teams platform. So and I've just got out of that, every Tuesday from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern time, folks from our accommodations team will be online. You can log in anytime. They don't have any formal presentation. You can log in anytime within that hour. Remember, 1 to 2 Eastern time. Maybe you just have a quick question and you've noted it on your calendar as a reminder. You log in, you ask your question, and you go on to the rest of your day. Sometimes people like to quote unquote hang out and just listen to any other questions that might be posed by other educators, and, you know, kind of treat it as a learning experience. Sometimes there's no one on those calls, but the accommodations folks are there just in case you need them or you have a quick question. And that can make the difference of being on hold for some simple questions that you might have, or you're unsure about something. Now, if you do have questions related to a specific student, they will not discuss any individual student cases on that particular Teams webinar for privacy reasons, but you can exchange contact information, and then they'll get back to you regarding that particular student. So I encourage you to take full advantage of those. All right, what else do we have on this website? Obviously, it'll take me back to the Ohio ACT website. Now under prepare for testing. So as I said, our first deadline, which we're doing a little bit of following up, trying to get everybody secure, was that test date selection from November 1 till last Friday. Hopefully we'll have that all closed up in another day or two. And then your next deadline is actually going to be for accommodations and then student data upload. The reason this first bullet, if you will, for the December 3rd is important because they want to get all their ducks in a row, the operations folks, and they'll be sending out a kind of a teaser shipment that will be samples of the manuals. And they're targeted to go out next week. So ideally, we can get everybody squared away where they've picked their dates and you can get that sample mailing with the manuals before the holidays. Then on January 7th, the accommodations window closes. It opened mid-September. The one deadline that does not really have any flexibility is the accommodations deadline. So if you have students that you are going to be requesting accommodations for, you would want to make that a priority because the deadline is going to be the Friday when you come back after New Year's. And you may or may not have that at top of mind. So again, if you can get that all squared away before the holidays, I think you would breathe better. But you do have till January 7th. Now I'll be going into some of the changes and updates after I get through this schedule related to accommodations, but make a note, accommodations deadline, January 7th. January 14th, again, is the deadline for uploading the student data. Now, personally, Beth and I got involved in this last year, mid-January. And again, because of people, not always being in their buildings and things being in such influx, we had a number of schools and districts that were behind the 8 ball, and they missed that deadline. So that didn't mean they couldn't test, but it does mean there's another hoop or two or step or two you have to go through. And our goal is to not have anybody miss those deadlines so that, your materials come when they're supposed to and you don't have to go in and order extra materials and so on. So January 14th is a big deal. The other thing that I would call out is if you know that you are going to test window 1, you might want to simply print this whole document out or copy and paste all the steps and due dates related to whatever window you're testing in, and put it in a Word document, because then you can highlight it, you can make notes on it when you've completed something, and it seems to be a little bit more manageable. And you'll see, prepare for test window 1, 2, and so on. Now, if you have students who test in window 1 and you have students that were absent and you weren't testing online, then following that testing date, actually as early as that afternoon, you can place a materials order for makeup. You would not use the materials that you originally got. One reason why scores can be invalidated is using the wrong testing materials. So each testing date, even for online, each testing date has different materials, a different test form. So that's a big deal. Beth, I'm gonna turn to you before I get out of this schedule. Is there anything pertinent that you can think of related to dates?
No, just remember them and follow them.
Yeah, take a look. It's probably not a bad idea to not look at them on Fridays, because a lot of deadlines are Fridays. Look at them on Monday, and you got a little bit of a cushion then that you've built in. All right, so I'm going back to the Ohio ACT website, or sometimes they refer to as the ACT hosted website. We did a few glances at the schedule of events. I'm coming down to helpful links. Again, some of this is old hat for you. You got a link to take you to Pearson Access Next, to accommodations, an FAQ for state testing. The office hours I just went through. There's your link for the accommodations, and there's your link if you want to register for any of the live test administration office hours. And then contact information. Now again, sometimes hindsight is 20/20 and we learn from mistakes or we learn for bumps in the road. Last year, ACT added a large number of folks to our level 1 customer support lines. And they were hired over a period of several months, which meant training happened over several months with different groups. What we learned was when it comes to state testing questions, it's probably best that we would have our level 2 handle those calls. So there's been a new phone number, or I should say an additional phone number that's been added that will take you to that team right here under contact information for Ohio questions. So that's all about test administration. There's the old number you can get through, but they also handle calls for other things. Accommodations, you've got contact information there. And if you have a question that would really be an ODE question, like one came in, Beth had recently, a school had an international student, they wanted to know, quote unquote, are they required to test that student? That would be an ODE question. We don't have anything to do with the requirements, who has to. That's ODE, and we would encourage you to reach out to them to ask those questions. It's not that we're trying to skirt the issue, we're just trying to be respectful of their wishes. So now what you'll notice on this website, and I won't go through all these, there's 7 steps or groupings of processes that need to be completed. And let me tell you, it's all outlined. There's a lot of information here, but there's a lot of information here. And sometimes even after I've been in this website for on and off over the years, I sometimes find myself just staring at a header, looking for something, and it's right in front of me. So don't feel bad if you find that you're encountering the same thing. Whether you were completing that task of managed participation, the test date selection, and ordering and choosing your ordering dates and all that, we have helpful tutorials that walk you through every process. So whether it's in a narrated presentation with screens, you follow along with the screens, or it's a tutorial that you just follow through screenshots, sometimes it's overkill. And when I say that, there may be 3 steps that you'll see all on one screen, but the PowerPoint has a slide for each individual step, and you feel like, oh my gosh, I gotta do all that. And when it was all said and done, such as picking your test date and your materials, took all of maybe a minute and a half, and that was probably stretching it out. But sometimes people don't necessarily see, if they go into one of those tutorials, sometimes this gray circle in the center doesn't jump out. And, I've run into that time and time again. So you got to click on that, and then you can run through the slides. So I'll just do a couple of these so you can see what I mean. This tutorial goes through everything, as simple as logging in. And then choosing your school up there. So you would choose the school and not the district name, so not the one with a Z. And as I said, it's going to walk you through all of the steps. Somebody say something? Okay, so there's that. Step 2, under configuration, This is where you're gonna have your instructions, your tutorial, your sample header template for uploading your students. And there's that training tutorial. Now, I'm gonna mention 3 things that if they have an error when they create their file and try to upload it, there's 3 common errors. One is, even if a column is blank and there's no data in it, do not delete the column. If you brought in middle initial and the middle initial has any salutation, so if it's L with a period, that period is going to cause an error in your upload. So you have 1 or 2 choices. You can delete the punctuation or you can remove the middle initial entirely. That is your choice. That's an optional thing. I guess it would depend if you're worried if you've got more than 1 student with similar names. And then the 3rd common error that I've encountered with folks that have started the upload process is sometimes the date of birth field will convert and the format will change. And so it's a simple, you go into the Excel file, you go to format, and you correct that format of that date of birth. Those are the most 3 common errors that I have become aware of over the years. If you encounter an error, it will give you instructions as to what might have been the glitch. And there's plenty of help, whether it's us or other folks, but the errors are typically not a lot, but it can happen. Now I'm gonna scroll down a bit. I'm gonna mention something about accommodations, and I have these in slides that I may or may not need to look at for you. So one of the changes with accommodations is just a terminology change. So we had some folks that got tripped up by late consideration, that terminology. And late consideration did not mean that you missed the deadline. It meant that there was something new since the deadline. A student moved into your district or your school, and they are going to be needing accommodations, and they enrolled after that date of January 7th. You might have some students or a student that you have additional documentation for, and you want another look for them to be considered under that late consideration window. Those are kind of the common options, but not that you missed a deadline. So remember, again, that January 7th is not a deadline that they will fudge typically. If you have staff that are going to help with requesting accommodations, then the first thing they should do is open an account, if you will, set up an account in success.act.org, which is where people would access ordering materials, they would access online reporting, but if they've never created a success.act.org account, that's the first step to be able to be part of the requesting accommodations staff. I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna look at my colleague here who she could easily be going through all this. And I don't wanna steal all the thunder. Is there anything regarding accommodations, Beth, that you would like to add?
I think the only thing that I would add would be it's not really an ad, but one of the changes that we made this year is that the process will be smoother. So if you had students who you had to continually add documentation for, or who weren't approved, that process has been streamlined. In the past, ACT was using guidelines from IDEA or ADA as opposed to IDEA, which is what high schools are using. We have brought in that just kind of come in line with what you're using. So pretty much right now, if a student is being accommodated based on an IEP or a 504, it will be approved. Unless there is something that we just have never heard of or that's, extremely unreasonable in that IEP or 504, there will be many more approvals so that you shouldn't have to continue to ask for accommodations for your students. So I think you'll find the process dramatically streamlined. And what we know right now is that, I heard a stat last week, over 90% of the accommodations that had been requested had been approved. So they're moving pretty quickly, and they are making it much more easy on you. So I think that's still in change. And I've been monitoring the chat, so there have not been any questions yet. If there are questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and I'll answer them while Vicky's talking.
Yeah.
If you want to minimize that right there.
Oh, good.
Get rid of that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the other thing that I would chime in on the accommodations, a lot of it has to do with timing, how quick they'll process. So, it has not been really jam-packed from September up to current. So they've been able, actually, I think, related to what you said in terms of numbers, typically, I think it's only been taking a few days and the responses are back. So let's say you requested accommodations for a student and you have questions, maybe it was denied. Again, you could certainly reach out to the accommodations team. You've got the contact information, but they're gonna give you some direction as to why it might have been denied and give suggestions of additional documentation. But just to echo what Beth said, yeah, from our understanding, following the IDEA methodology will make things much quicker and take the guesswork out, which I think is going to be good for everyone. Something that came up, and I guess I might have heard this on the initial November webinar. So I missed that in the scheduled events. There's links on that schedule of events. November 9th and November 11th, there were 2 webinars. The 9th was an overview of test accommodations for Ohio only, and test administration, and the 11th was accommodations. And I listened to the accommodations one myself, and they would read off some of the questions that came in the chat. And so there's one about where there is a form you're supposed to send home to the families. And somebody said, what if we're having trouble getting that back? Could we email it and then they give us a response or they give us a call? And the answer was yes, that process is there for the school's protection, so that they've gotten the approval from a parent to request accommodations. It's not really for ACT, it's for you to have on your files. So if you as a school or district are fine with noting that you had a phone call or you had an email exchange with a parent approving, the accommodations that you were requesting on behalf of their son or daughter, that's all ACT needs. All right, I'm moving down to step 4, because this is where, if we have any school counselors on the line, and this may fall into your area, or sometimes there's folks that have a title of college and career readiness, and this might overlap. So one of the pieces of information under preparation is also going to be student preparation. So today this morning, we were given an overview of a variety of resources and online reporting and data and the such, and somebody asked about online practice tests. And there is an option under preparation for students where they can access an online practice test from this site. So you could put a link on your guidance counselor website or however you would best communicate to students. Also, they have the opportunity in My ACT, which if they've tested before, already have a My ACT account. If they haven't, they can create one now, and that doesn't have to have anything to do with registering for a test. They can access test prep, they can access the career planning resources, you know, at their leisure. So know that there is a link in here for students, whether they want to access a paper practice or if they want to access an online practice. That preparing guide, which I had a visual and I put it in my bag, the preparing for the ACT, there is a link here that you can download it, but why, if it's somebody, if a student, rather than somebody printing it out, if that's what they were gonna do, we will send you hundreds at a time. Now, as we get close to the holidays, I think it's a good idea to place an order sooner rather than later. It is the 7th of December today. And put that in the hands of your juniors before they break for Christmas. So you probably want to get that order in soon. Generally, we say to allow roughly 10 working days for them to be delivered. So hopefully you can squeeze in an order if you haven't already done so. If the students want to access the online practice test that's within this preparation area, then they would have to download TestNav, which I did it on my computer. It takes literally minutes, and then you can use the online sample test, and it will even show you how some of the accessibility features work for online. I'm not gonna go in too much deeper with online testing. As I said, there is the upcoming webinar. There'll be resources, the quick start guide. You can see one of the links here is switching from paper to online. We don't care either way. I mean, whatever works best for your audience. I've heard schools and educators say, we'll never go back to paper. I've had some schools say, you know, we tried online and we had some students that were antsy about it, so we're going back to paper. Some of our larger districts, you know, would probably be the first to say that online is a little bit easier for them as far as just getting the materials and that sort of thing. And if it's a multi-high school district, it can be a little bit more of a pain because the materials are going to be sent to the district office per the instructions of ODE. And if your schools are spread out, then they have to be transported to each of those schools for the actual testing. All right, let's see. No questions, huh?
Oh, yeah, we've had some questions about just the web address to get to this page, the Ohio page, which I did put out in the chat.
Good. Remember, you can find it from ODE's website.
And
here, I'll go back there. I got ODE pulled up. I typed in Ohio Department of Ed, ACT. I came to this page. Down here towards the bottom on the left-hand side under contact information, state ACT website for Ohio.
And I also put the directact.org link in the chat. And a question about ordering extra materials for those new students who do move in and where to find that, which is also in there.
Okay, and remember, ordering materials, so if you are testing on the first testing date and you're gonna have students who weren't part of your upload by January 14th, then that's when you're gonna go in and adjust your order, or if you've got makeup. We could probably do that in our sleep once we had a 5-minute refresher, because we helped many educators last year. But I think the most important tip I could tell you is everything you would need to know or need to know how to do is all right here on this ACT hosted website. And let me tell you, those tutorials are a breeze. If you've got 2 screens on your desk, even better, because you can just follow along step by step. And whatever it tells you to do next, click a button, make a selection, and it makes it pretty easy. Go ahead.
An example of a question that's a State Department of Ed question is, a sophomore wants to graduate early but they're still a sophomore, can they test with the juniors? And that's really a question for ODE.
Yeah, that would be an ODE question, as to, and I know they've had questions regarding who should be part of that junior cohort before. All right, well, now I might ask my handy IT guy, we'll see if I missed anything that I put in some slides. Keep the questions coming, because as I said, this is a refresher, and we want you to get the information you need. We're switching it. When you go from like internet to a PowerPoint, there's a little bit of a lag, and when you got us on camera and recording, there's a few extra technology steps that I wouldn't know anything about. Now, I will say that when we got the list from Ohio Department of Ed that should have included the current district test coordinator, we have found, because ODE wanted to start out fresh, that not every superintendent necessarily included the right person or updated it. So we're hoping that we have uncovered those who may have changed and they weren't part of that file that ODE provided. If not, ask around, if you're in the role now and you've not seen anything since the end of October, then there's a problem and we don't have the right person listed. We've been doing some follow-up on that, on the managed participation step. And so if an email kicks back, then we know to call the school and find out who's in that role. But sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So I would say if a district test coordinator has not had any communication from ACT from October on, because there would have been a few communications already sent, then we want you to reach out to either us or the number that I provided there, that Ohio ACT number that you found on the website. Excellent. All righty. Well, this is just to keep me honest and see if there's anything that I put in a slide format that I have forgotten to mention, so bear with me. I think most of them we've already talked about. So when I said that we're moving away from reconsideration, that will be part of the terminology. We're also not saying initial and makeup dates, test window 1, 2, and 3. But again, if you're testing paper and you're testing window 3 and you're not planning to test 1 or 2, you need to contact ODE first, because they need to give their stamp of approval. The late consideration now is referred to just after we train you to learn verbiage and phrases, we change them on you. So now we're calling it qualified exceptions to the deadline. So again, not because I missed the deadline, but because there's something new or a new student moved in our school or district. There's your test dates. I've said them multiple times, and we'll be capturing who was on this webinar, and we can send you some screenshots and some links if that makes it easier as well. If there's somebody that's on this call or on this webinar that knows that you've missed the December 3rd deadline, if you put something in chat, and after, Beth or I will reach out to you and spend that 2 minutes to walk you through, and you'll have it done right away. So try to put that in chat, and then we know to reach out to you and you'll have it done. The test nav, just as I said, that's going to be the software that students, if they want to try an online ACT, that will be the same software if you are testing online. And again, We would encourage you to do a mock administration. The other thing with online testing is proctor caching makes a world of difference. Now, I'm not sure if we have required it again. We had required it and then we said recommended. But if there's ever issues with online reporting, it's because somebody didn't proctor cache. Probably 98% of the time. The reason you want to do some of those mock administrations, so you know if you've got the bandwidth and if you guys, if your school or district, your IT setup can handle the online testing. The online testing in each window will span over 2 weeks, but not 2 complete weeks. We do online testing on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So 6 days times 3 windows, there's 18 test dates that are options for online testing. If you choose paper testing and you choose test window 1, that March 1, really you've got 2 more makeups. I mean, you ideally hope that you'll be able to get it done as quickly as possible, but worst case scenario, you do have that window 3 or that standard testing date 3 as that final makeup. This was what we were talking about, or I was talking about regarding accommodations. If there's anybody that is going to be new at requesting accommodations, if they've not done anything, that probably means they also have not created a success.act.org account. And that is going to be the first step. And you have the ability there to request accommodations access. I've talked a little bit about the ACT hosted website, pre-test activities. So the district test coordinator, one of the reasons there is a school and or sometimes they're one and the same district test coordinator is because the materials at the wishes of ODE are sent to the district office. Often that district office is an off-site building. And so since the district test coordinator is the person who actually opens up the box of materials, verifies that they are all there, and even with online testing, there are some materials. And they're the person who would also be responsible for shipping any of the materials back to ACT, whether it's from paper or online following testing. So you've probably heard rumblings over the years, and I remember the first year when I did overview sessions that I would talk about who could be a district test coordinator. Now, because that individual is the person who handles test materials, secure test materials, one way or another before and after testing, then ACT does not want to put that person in an awkward situation. And, you know, let's say, for example, some classmate, maybe you're the district test coordinator and you have a son or daughter in the school or district, and a friend or a classmate catches wind and they say, so-and-so's mom is in charge of the ACT. Well, in charge doesn't mean that you're giving your son or daughter answers to the ACT. But to not put you in that vulnerable situation, if you have a child, a grandchild, a niece and nephew, and I'm not here to judge, I'm told that it still states in the manual a spouse, I can't look at anybody, that you cannot serve as a district test coordinator. Now, having said that, let's say that comes as a big surprise to you. And I should say, if your son or daughter or grandchild or niece or nephew, etc., are also testing with the ACT in the state of Ohio on the same test date. Now, I ran into this the other day, and I was with a group, and it was right around them trying to complete that test date selection, and the lady who's an EMIS coordinator has a daughter who's a junior at another school. And she said, can you look and see what they've picked? Well, they picked a different date, so she doesn't need to find somebody to fulfill her role. But if you are the district test coordinator and you're helping with some of these earlier steps, whether it's putting the dates in the computer in the test admin site, the PA Next site, or you're uploading the students, or you're helping with accommodations, you know what? That's fine. But before the point of materials being shipped to your district, you should find someone else who can now assume that role, and they will be the recipient of the materials and the shipper backer of the materials after testing. And that again is not that you're not trusted, it's we don't want to put, ACT does not want to put you in an awkward situation. End of story. Now, let's say somebody, it's interesting because over the last few years, people start to realize that and say, I won't be able to do it next year because, but you can still be a room supervisor, you can still be a proctor. If you have someone that is of that family relation at your school, then it would make sense. You would not have them in the same classroom if you're a room supervisor or proctor. One of the other, and all these are spelled out in the manual, and I know everybody loves to read manuals. I would say grab a hold of the manual, highlight some of the important things, who can serve as what, some of those important details that you want to share as part of your training. If someone is a coach and teacher, or they're coach and they have other responsibilities, they can be a proctor, but they cannot supervise individual student testing. So sometimes students that have accommodations might be testing in a room by themselves because they're the only one with those set of testing conditions or timing code, etc. So that's an important area to look at. We had probably 2 years ago about 17% of Ohio schools and districts tested online. Last year, we were somewhere in that 34 to 36% range. And part of that could have been due to COVID, of course, and being able to meet the needs. And sometimes students were still learning remotely, and they might bring in one half the group one day and the other half the group when they did alternating days, etc. So just to give you an idea, it's too soon for us to know what that percentage looks like this year. And mixed mode is an option. Now, although I don't have the details on mixed mode, somebody said to me the other day, who would want to do that? I don't know. But in other words, if you want to test some students on paper and some students online, you have the opportunity to do that. Last year, you might recall, okay, I'm not going to go through all this because we already did this. Last year, you might recall that we had, lost my train of thought. Oh, we rolled out this new system related to MyACT. So MyACT was new in the summer, and then Ohio, of course, the ODE picked the very first testing date, which was cutting it so close to that new code system that it caused havoc. You will not have those issues this year. It just so happens that we always have the majority, more than half of Ohio schools choose the first test date, and that happened to be when they were rolling out that new process with the code where students would fill that out within 24 hours, etc. There'll be more information coming on that, and I know that one of the administration webinars will be talking about that whole process. And the reason that process is there is, remember, students aren't registering for the state test. If you participate in district testing, students don't register. That student upload is basically the registration process. So there needs to be a mechanism in which ACT can link those scores, especially for students who might already have a MyACT account or later want to send scores to colleges and universities. We have to have a mechanism to know who they are and be able to connect that with that particular student. I'm gonna pause and see if there's any burning questions. We knew this would just be kind of an overview.
Everybody wants a copy of the screen of the slideshow.
Okay, that's fine.
I gave them the ODE contact name.
And we like it when you don't stump the presenters too, so.
So far, so good.
If you have to stump us later, that's okay too. All right, I don't know if I have anything else that is burning right now. I mean, you know, I wish we could do something about deadlines, but remember, there are a lot of states that do statewide testing, and when you're juggling all that and trying to ensure that schools get the materials that they can test, that we can get them back and score sooner. Now, we put in writing, in print, that the turnaround time for reporting, for students to see the scores, for them to show up in the online portal, we give it a pretty broad range, 3 weeks to 7 weeks. Historically, I would say the average is right around 4 to roughly 4.5 weeks. We've had reports where schools have gotten their score, where students have gotten their results, where the school has able to see the results in 3 to 3.5 weeks. Know that accommodations, students who test with accommodations can often be, can be delayed. But when those materials come back, you know, they're scanned in and they're starting to be cycled in for the scoring. One thing I didn't really talk about, and it kind of fits but doesn't so much fit here, and that's related to students who have tested before. 2 things: if they've tested before and they've tested with accommodations, remember, all the hard work's done. You've already uploaded the documentation. All you have to do is to log into the TAA system, find that student, and you will select the new test date. And if I remember from our fall kind of overview training, it will also say the state name in there so that you would know. Because in some months, there's state testing, there's district testing, and there's national testing. Now, this year, we're not hitting February, but that was pretty common when we were testing students at the end of February. There was also national testing in February and district. The other would be related to if a student has if they've already tested or they've created a MyACT account. In most cases, they wouldn't have a MyACT account yet because they wouldn't have thought about it if they hadn't tested or you hadn't encouraged them yet. If they do, you have an opportunity to look in your online reporting system and see if they already have an ACT ID number, they already have an account. It's always best not to create duplicate accounts because that slows things up. Unfortunately, when it comes to national testing, we might have parents who are registering their kids using their email, and the kids don't know that the mom or dad used that email and registered the kid, and then the kid doesn't think they have an account. But you know, we're hoping to kind of have some of that past us. We won't have as many duplicate accounts arising probably now as we did a year ago. I am not thinking anything else that's burning right now.
Nor is the chat burning up.
Okay. Well, I always hate it when people at ACT say, I'm gonna give you X amount of minutes back to your day. What, really? No, but we're gonna let you off the hook unless you've got some burning questions. I hope at least some of the little refresher notes. If nothing else, please have that website saved as a favorite. Go to it periodically. If you want to print it out and highlight and mark it up, share it with colleagues. When you get that sample manual or manuals that come in the mail before the holidays, if you're in the mood, maybe open it up and, you know, start marking a few things, highlighting a few things, and maybe have a colleague. If you've got a colleague or administrative assistant that's really good about looking at details, maybe have them look at it and highlight things that they think are hot buttons. Let me tell you, there is not a rule or regulation that is not already noted in those manuals.
I just again put the website address in the chat.
Excellent, excellent. You like doing the chat.
I like the chat.
Well, I guess we'll give it a couple more seconds, see if anybody has any burning questions. Remember, we're around. You've got those regular test administration webinars, either live or recorded. You can sit at your desk and listen to it, which we often do when we're busy. Take advantage of the accommodations open hours. Like I said, even don't feel like I'm just, you know, logging in and running. You can do that. We encourage that. But if you want to stay for the whole time, fine. Just know that they're on a regular basis, and maybe you save up your question till that open office hours.
People are just saying thanks now.
Have a good, I don't even know what day it is. Good rest of the week. If we don't have communication with you between now and the holidays, have a great Christmas and New Year's. I'm sure you've all earned the rest time. So thanks for joining.
Sydney High School, is that me or you?
Well, there's two Sydneys. And I think that one is yours. That was the first, I don't know when I